Maybe the reason that nobody can agree on what God is because we've been approaching the question the wrong way. Every tradition tries to describe it. Every religion paints a picture. And then for centuries, people argue over who has the right picture. But there is an old approach that doesn't try to describe God at all. Instead of asking the question, what is God? It asks the question, what is God not? And the answer can lead to something that you can notice right now in your direct experience. The word for this approach is apophatic. It comes from the Greek word apophasis, which means to deny or to say away. It makes sense because some things can't be put into words. When language fails, sometimes the most truthful answer is to stay silent. Or failing that, for example, if you have a YouTube channel where you talk about these things, then sometimes the best thing to do is to start subtracting. This approach has a long history, and it runs through almost every wisdom tradition. In the 5th century, there was a Christian mystic who wrote under the name of Dionysius the Areopagite. They said that God is beyond all affirmation and negation, that even calling God good or existent falls short because these are human categories, and God exceeds every category that we have. Meister Eckhart, the 14th century Christian mystic, took it even further. He said the most beautiful thing a person can say about God is to stay silent, out of the wisdom of inner fullness. And then he kept talking, because he had to, because we're human, and we reach for words even when we know they'll fall short. The Tao Te Ching opens with the exact same problem. The very first line says, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. That is the first line, followed by a whole book of words. And the Upanishads use a phrase that has always struck me as one of the most profound things ever written. Neti, neti. Not this, not this. When the ancient sages were asked to describe Brahman, they didn't reach for grand descriptions. They subtracted. They pointed away from. They said not this, not this, not this, until what remained couldn't be pointed away from. And then there is the Buddha, who, when asked about the ultimate nature of reality, whether there is a self that survives beyond death, whether there is a God, he said nothing. Instead, he changed the subject, or he picked up a flower, because he saw what happens when people get hold of a concept. Even when it's a true one or a beautiful one, people turn it into an idea that we can then cling to. We turn it into a position that we can defend. We turn it into our identity that needs protecting. So when the Buddha talked about shunyata, emptiness, or anatta, no self, he wasn't actually making a metaphysical claim that nothing existed. He was just trying to help people not become attached to concepts. He was doing something apophatic. He was saying that whatever you think you are, your self with boundaries and edges that you walk around identifying with, that is not actually who you are. What is actually there cannot be pinned down with a concept. If the Buddha had gone further and had said, your true nature is divine consciousness, or your ultimate being is Brahman, then he knew exactly what would happen. People would become attached to those ideas, and then we would be no closer to the actual experience. Let's try the apophatic approach ourselves. God does not have a body. God does not have boundaries or edges. God cannot be located in a particular space. You cannot point at God and say, there it is. God is not a being among other beings. God is not a big, powerful person up there somewhere beyond the clouds. God is not limited to one tradition, one scripture, or one name. So now, at this point, some people will say, well, God is not real then. And that's a fair response. But this raises a question. What do we actually mean by real? We tend to assume that reality is made up of fixed, solid, independent things with clear boundaries that exist in the world out there. But both philosophy and modern physics have started to complicate the picture. The deeper we look, the harder it becomes to find these clear, separate boundaries that we instinctively imagine. So perhaps the question isn't really whether God is real in the same sense that this microphone is real. Maybe the question is whether reality is actually more mysterious and more interconnected than we could ever possibly imagine. The deeper issue is that every word that we could use to describe God, light, love, consciousness, being, presence, are all relating to human experience, when what we're trying to describe goes way beyond human experience. If we can't say what God is, if every description falls short, if silence is actually the most honest answer, then where does that leave us? Well, it's something that we can actually notice right now if we pay attention. Notice the feeling of your body as you watch this. Notice the pumping of the blood around your body. You can notice it in your fingertips if you pay attention, or in your chest, or in your temples. Notice the breath as it enters and leaves your lungs. You don't decide to breathe, it's just happening. Notice the sounds around you. They're all just arising without invitation. Now, instead of being aware of something, turn the awareness back in on itself. So instead of listening to the sounds and noticing the sensations, notice the awareness in which those things arise. What is it that notices sound? What is it that experiences breathing? What is it that is aware right now of these words? Don't try to answer these questions with a thought, because that is just another object appearing within awareness. Instead, just pay attention to what that is. What we find is something that cannot be made into an object. It is the subject. It is the knower, not the known. It has no edges, no shape, no colour, no location that you can point to. And yet it is the most undeniable thing in our experience, because without it, there is no experience. This is exactly what Ramana Maharshi was pointing to when he asked the question, "Who am I?" And what every tradition seems to agree on, that beneath the scriptures and the doctrine and the teachings is this awareness. And that awareness is not separate from God. It is the very knowing in which out there and in here arises. Meister Eckhart called it the ground of the soul. The Upanishads called it Sat Chit Ananda. The Buddha refused to name it, and maybe in that refusal pointed most directly at it. And Lao Tzu wrote 5,000 words about the thing that cannot be spoken. Is that a contradiction? Or maybe the perfect act of love? The most honest thing to say is not this, not this. The second most honest thing is to say nothing at all. And the third most honest thing is what we've been doing here, to point towards what cannot be pointed away from. You don't need to go looking for it. You are already looking from it. And if you are looking from it, maybe you are it. That's what I talk about in this video.